Good morning, everybody. Well, as you can see, I've not been able to come here to Ithaca and join this marvelous meeting. So I have sent this video file to the committee, hoping that my little contribution may be of your interest. So let's talk about player piano roles in Spain. I would like to concentrate in three main topics. First, the case of Victoria Rolls, which was the leader of the roll market here in Spain. Secondly, I'd like to share with you some of our activities related to preservation and analysis of player piano and reproducing rolls, maybe including some of our doubts in this field. And finally, I'd like to show you some of the discoveries we've made, like unreleased recordings by Federico Mompou or Joaquin Rodrigo, and some unknown pieces by Mompou also and Blancafort, pieces signed under pseudonym that we think are quite interesting. So, starting from the historical point of view, I have to say that talking about player piano music in Spain is necessarily talking about Victoria rolls. Of course, there were so many other roll companies in Spain, but none of them had the power and the impact of Victoria. Based in La Garriga, a small village 20 miles from Barcelona, Victoria was founded in 1905 by Joan Baptista Blancafort, the father of composer Manuel Blancafort. It was the first Iberian company dedicated to the production of player piano rolls, and a significant part of these rolls were exported to Europe, South America, and Oceania. If you take a brief look at the last version of its catalog from 1929, we can deduce some interesting questions about how Victoria draws its market. The catalog has about 4,500 titles, with every single roll sold in three possible formats: 65 notes, 88 standard, which means without pedaling and accents, and 88 notes with accentuation. The generous distribution seems to keep quite a compromise between classical and popular music, maybe with some similarities with the first catalogs published by Aeolian in Europe. This picture shows the number of rolls per section, so if we ignore the miscellaneous category, which is kind of a mix of everything, we can clearly see the dominion of two areas: classical music, with classical composers plus zarzuela and opera, and dance music. When we take a look at the composers, we find a predictable balance between classical or romantic canon and the Spanish zarzuela, that, as you may know, is a lyric genre incorporating operatic and popular song as well as dance. So Beethoven stands out as the composer with more presence in the catalog, with 220 rolls, followed by Chopin and Wagner. We have to remember the love affair between Barcelona and Wagner at that time. However, the presence of composers like Guerrero, Alonso, or Vives is quite a proof of the great relevance of the zarzuela in our markets. It is also interesting to pay attention to the presence of a female figure, Cecily Cheminade, which is also found in most of the great catalog companies. This is probably a good argument for those who have accused the traditional historiography and the inertia of the music academia of a strong androcentrism. Although many of the compositions of Cheminade enjoyed a great popularity at that time, 100 years later, it's really difficult to find her name in the academic field. The same happens with nearly forgotten composers here, like Adelina Ombravella or Narcisa Freixas. Therefore, we can not ignore the importance of these catalogs, those of all publishers, I mean, because when crossed with information given by private collections, this allows us to scan the musical reception from a new perspective. I would say from a real perspective, maybe. In popular music, for instance, we find some interesting clues about the entry of American dance music to the Spanish market. Uh, Dances like foxtrot, ragtime, etc. And also how these new styles influence and interact with our societies, also with our composers, as I will show you later. This is quite relevant as we have very few information about this topic and the pianola phenomenon through the study of catalogs, private collections, and documentation, etc., allows us to rethink how we brought some parts of our recent music history. Um, we are documenting, for example, such a big amount of dance music edited by Victoria in the early times, much earlier than it has been credited by the official discourses, with names nearly unknown for us, like Clifton Worsley, which was the name for Pere Astort i Ribas, a Catalan composer that had a real impact in not only in our markets but even abroad. In fact, if you put Clifton Worsley in YouTube, you'll find some American pianist playing his tunes. So this was such a surprise for us. Moving to the preservation field, our department has been working with piano rolls since 2009, sadly quite discontinually due to lack of investment in musicological research. However, in collaboration with the Computer Vision Center of our university, we managed to design a system to transfer the rolls to digital and to obtain a MIDI file from the rolls. The equipment is composed of a mechanical set with a trigger and a camera that captures the image from the roll and sends the information to a computer through a Ethernet connection. I have to say that our system has been conceived more for preservation than for dissemination purposes. And by now, expression and pedaling data it's been studied, as we consider that we still have some research to do on this topic. We are also aware of the implications of an optical capture, and we're working on different options to improve our procedures. However, the interest of institutions such as the Music Museum in Barcelona, the National Library of Spain, and the National Library in Catalonia in preserving its collection allows us to work with a dual motivation: to preserve these supports, forgotten for almost a century, while obtaining and generating knowledge from them. Unfortunately, a huge amount of technical and historical information about roll production in Spain was lost during the Spanish Civil War. However, in the case of Victoria, we have found some interesting documents, personal writings, pictures, and some of the letters belonging to Manuel Blancafort, which contains, for example, the narration of several trips made by the composer to the States in the 20s. In one of these letters, Blancafort explains that his main goals are Aeolian and QRS, but none of them let him visit the factories, as they consider Victoria as their main enemy for the Southern Europe markets. He then is able to arrange a visit to the Kohler and Campbell factory in New York, explaining that its production is 1,200 rolls per year. And this is quite similar, he says, of the production in La Garriga. This is an interesting information for us because it gives us a clue for the real volume of production in Catalonia, that we thought it was quite far from this. Another interesting information about technical issues is that in La Garriga, perforation machinery, now you can see some pictures, seems to perforate a maximum of 6 rolls simultaneously, in contrast with the 48 perforations seen by Blancafort in some American companies. After checking all the process, Blancafort concludes that the main difference between Catalan and American production is its capacity to work very quickly in two areas: the punching process and the printing of all the graphical information. In this strip, Blancafort sees some different systems for recording from the piano, and surprisingly for us, he doesn't make any special comment about it. And I say surprisingly because Victoria did not publish any recorded roll of any type. However, the only comment we find in this letter is this is just what we did with Cabanac some years ago. Cabanac is the name of the watchmaker of La Garriga. So we assume that the recording process was possible in La Garriga, and for some reasons Victoria did not use it for commercial purposes. From the research point of view, the close friendship of Blancafort with the greatest composers of the time may indicate that some of these artists could have recorded piano rolls. A definitive proof of this is found in a list drawn up in the late 80s by Manuel Blancafort, conserved in the National Library of Catalonia. In this document, called Musicians That Visit Victoria's Factory, we find such important names like Enric Granados, Federico Mompou, Ricardo Viñas, Pau Casals, Andrés Segovia, or Joaquín Rodrigo. And about this last one, the author writes, "After lunch, we moved to the factory, and he recorded some piano rolls." This is confirmed in a letter that Rodrigo sends to Blancafort in the summer of 1930, where he explained that the recordings made were Zarabanda, probably Zarabanda Lejana, Lullaby of Spring, and certain air of ballad about a beautiful woman, which is not in the catalogue of the author. So that could be a work in progress, or maybe an improvisation. By now, we don't have much more information about the system used for these recordings. In absence of any technical information, we only have the witness of a 94-year-old Enric Basset, the last alive son of Victoria's factory worker. Mr. Basset told us that he remembers his father talking about a prepared piano that was filled with some mercury platforms under the keyboard and a lot of cable going through another room. Despite the lack of documents about this interesting episode, we have been able to locate some of this recording at the home of one of the descendants of Blancafort. This finding includes two unknown pieces of Blancafort and the first and second preludes of Frederic Mompou, played by the author. This is the first recording of Mompou at the piano. And as I said, none of these recorded rolls were published, although, as you can see, some of them have a commercial look. The case of the prelude is significant because, as an early recording of Mompou, shows some interesting details of his playing style. Melody delay is one of these aspects, still relevant in his later recording in disc, but even more prominent in this raw recording. As you will see, the image reveals a constant dislocation applied on every note involved in the passage. In this sense, modern recordings of this piece made by great pianists like Jordi Roquer, Anita Pontremoli, Martin Jones, Esther Pineda, among others, they used to play with an absolute synchronization between their hands. It is just a matter of interpretation styles, and maybe the relevant thing here is not the way that Mompou uses this location, as this could be something quite obvious if you want, but the possibility of having a graphical representation of these features, giving us an empirical approach to something traditionally treated from the subjectivity of auditory perception. So we have been working in different ways to get some analytical approaches to this material, and we hope that in the future this can be an interesting tool to complement traditional analysis. Finally, not moving from Mompou, but jumping quite far from this well-known repertory, we have found 27 unknown pieces written under the pseudonym Hobby with his close friend Manuel Blancafort. Most of these pieces contain what we could call the own pianola language, which in at least in our case is represented by three aspects: tremolo melody, a huge harmonic density, and extended tessitura. This is an example in a piece called Time and Money, with some graphical support showing this prototypical density with its impossible voice movement. And another example with the tremolo melody in a piece called Catherine, with the subtitle Tremolo Valse. Again, graphical support shows this architectural logic of this type of roles. Well, I would love to keep talking about our researches, but I think this is more or less a brief synthesis of what we are doing in Barcelona. It is really a pain in the ass for me not to be here in Ithaca, since I'm aware of the many things I could learn from all of you. I've been in contact with some of you before via email, and I really love to expand these contacts. I'm looking very forward to read carefully your communications, and well, I hope not to have bored you with my speech. Thank you very much for your attention, and enjoy the rest of the conference.